And we now shift gears to discuss what some have termed converged media, but most of us know as podcasting. Holland Cooke, host of The Big Picture, joins us. Welcome, and thank you for coming back. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Okay, so first of all, you and I were discussing this early, and I'm embarrassed I didn't know all of the history. Give us the podcasting history. It's not that long, but it's very interesting.
Well, 17 years ago already, 2001, everyone had an iPod. And by 2007, nobody wanted one because along came iPhone, and it did everything the iPod could do and so much more. And at the time, this critter was invented for people to carry and share music. But this is an example of the user being ahead of the manufacturer, because the user figured out music, it's a sound file. We could make a sound file of voice, spoken word, and people started doing their own radio shows and passing them around on the internet. So at the outset, the term podcasting referred to iPod, but think of it today as POD, programming on demand, like Netflix for audio.
And how big is this? I mean, how many people are viewing these sorts of podcasts in the U.S.?
It's an impressive growth curve. Edison Research has been tracking this all along. And today, each month, 73 million Americans, that's 26% of the population, listen every month, up from 24% last year, 21% the year before. Steady growth. And every week, 48 million Americans, that's 17% of us listen, and that's up from 15%, from 13%. So it's slow, steady growth all along. This is a real thing.
We have 73 million, though a lot in a month. We've talked before about how media has changed. It used to be the 3 network, et cetera. Now you have other venues, thankfully, us, et cetera. But does podcasting afford an avenue, a venue for a voice, as it were, for those that might not be have such a megaphone any other way?
There is no audition. You can do it yourself radio, and it's a great place to break into radio because they are performing, meeting a deadline, scripting. So it's a great entry level for radio. But something interesting is happening now where people from the legacy media are now moving to podcasting. And you see a lot of stars going there. Katie Couric, we knew as NBC's Today Show. And then we knew her
She started right here in Washington.
Sure,
actually.
And the CBS Evening News, and then Yahoo. But guess what? Now it's Katie Couric Media. She has no platform, and her new podcast is called Getting There. It's a series featuring profiles of accomplished women. And without a name platform or a network underneath her, Procter & Gamble bought it sight unseen. So the money is following the ears to podcasting.
The ears, and when you said Procter & Gamble and Katie Couric, following the ears and the image, Katie Couric's image. You know, that makes me want to go back to the 73 million people you were talking about listen to these things every month. I mean, who are they? What sort of shows are they listening to? They're not all listening to Katie Couric.
Well, I bring you fresh data with an amusing punchline because Nielsen Podcast Insights has just released a marketer's guide to podcasting. You can download the whole thing on my website at hollandcooke.com in its entirety. And they have researched data on which products avid fans, meaning heavy podcast listeners, consume. And if you want to find a sponsor for your podcast and you're talking about news and politics, society and culture, science, business, arts, technology, or sports, this is not an opinion. Nielsen says liquor. I don't mean beer, I don't mean wine, I mean distilled spirits are what people who listen avidly to those topics will buy. And Nielsen tells us, third quarter 2018 data, that the revenue is now projected to be $402 million this year, up from $314 last year. By 2020, $659 million spent on do-it-yourself radio.
Lots of big numbers, and I am not going to make any comparisons or say what it means that people listening to podcasts are drinking a lot of hard liquor. Before we go, Holland, you know, those are U.S. numbers. Nielsen does U.S. numbers, but podcasts are a big deal around the world, right?
It is a World Wide Web, and unlike a broadcast station that has its 30 square miles, you're talking about whatever you want to talk about to anybody who's interested in it everywhere. For instance, podcasting is big in India. where the topics are stand-up comedy, food, sports, you know, cricket, right? And the weekly Indian startup show for Indian entrepreneurs. Australian true crime is big down under. And in the UK, You, Me, and the Big C is for people confronting cancer. So these are narrowcast topics for the whole world.
Holland Cooke, host of The Big Picture. Thank you, my friend.
You bet,
Appreciate it.
Kamish.